Table for two, the hostess said. And Elena watched her husband smile at the woman beside him the way he used to smile at her. She was standing at the entrance of Moretto's, the restaurant she had suggested for their anniversary 3 years running, and he had dismissed every time as too fussy. With a baby on each hip and a diaper bag on her shoulder, and 8 months of a secret she had been carrying alone. She had not planned this. She had come because Priya had called her, because Priya had been 2 tables away and had seen them before they saw her, because Priya knew what a person deserved to know, even when knowing it was going to cost something. Alina stood there for 4 seconds. Daniel did not see her yet. He was leaning forward, saying something low, and the woman, dark-haired, polished, 20-something in a dress that cost more than Elena's monthly grocery budget, was laughing with her head tilted back in the specific way of someone who has never once had to worry about being watched. The baby on Elena's left hip made a sound. A small, conversational sound, the kind Mia made when she was taking inventory of a new room. Daniel looked up. The color left his face so completely and so quickly that the man at the next table noticed and turned to look. Elena watched her husband's eyes move from her face to the baby's, to Mia on her left and Marco on her right. And she watched him do the math. And she watched the math land. He had not known. That was the truth she had been living with for 8 months. The specific, exhausting truth of knowing something enormous about 2 people who were the most important thing you had ever made, and knowing it alone. She had found out about the woman 4 weeks after the positive test. She had not told him about the pregnancy. She had packed a bag and gone to her mother's, and she had thought, for 4 very long months, about what she was going to do. She had not planned to do it like this. But here she was, at the entrance of Moretto's, with Mia and Marco and the full weight of 8 months pressing forward. If you have ever walked into a room and changed everything in it without saying a single word, you understand exactly what happened next. Stay with me. Subscribe now, because this story does not end at the restaurant door. The woman at the table had not understood yet. She was looking at Elena with the polite, blank expression of someone waiting for context. Elena could see the moment it arrived, the shift in the woman's face as she looked from Elena to Daniel to the babies and assembled the picture. The polished composure cracked just slightly, just enough. Daniel stood up. His chair scraped back. Elena, his voice had nothing in it. It was the voice of a man who has had all the air taken out of him and is now operating on whatever is left. How did you sit down? Elena said. Quietly, level the same voice she had used for 8 months with herself in the mirror when she needed to get through the next hour. I'm not here to make a scene. She was not. She had made a decision, somewhere in the 30-minute drive over, that whatever happened in this room, she would be the person she wanted her children to remember. Calm, clear, certain, she looked at the woman. I'm Elena, she said. I'm his wife. These are his children. He didn't know about them until right now, which is something you and I have in common. We've both been kept from the full picture. The woman stared at her. My name is Serena, the woman said. It came out smaller than she had clearly intended. Serena, Alina nodded once. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. That's not your fault. She looked back at Daniel. I need you to call a lawyer this week. I'll be at my mother's. You can see the children when the paperwork starts. She shifted Marco higher on her hip. He grabbed her collar with his whole fist and held on. Elena, Daniel's voice broke on the second syllable. Not performance, structure failing. The sound of a man standing in the wreckage of a thing he had built the wreckage of himself. Please, can we go somewhere and talk? We'll talk through lawyers, Elena said. That's what this became. She turned. She walked back through the restaurant. She heard the room behind her. The specific quality of a room that has just witnessed something and is not yet sure what to do with it. She did not look back. She had learned, in the 8 months of carrying this alone, that looking back cost more than it returned. She buckled Mia and Marco into their car seats in the parking garage with hands that shook slightly and then stopped. And she sat in the front seat for 3 minutes before she drove. And she called Priya. "I just walked into Moretto's," Elena said. Priya made a sound on the other end of the line that was not a word. He saw them. "Oh, Elena, I'm fine," Elena said. She was, and she wasn't, and she knew from 8 months of practice how to hold both of those things without one canceling out the other. "I need to call Miriam." Miriam was her lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer. Not then. Just a lawyer. A woman Elena had used for a lease dispute 2 years earlier, and had kept the card up because Miriam had the quality of someone who understood that being careful was not the same as being afraid. Elena called her from the garage. Miriam answered on the 3rd ring and listened to 4 sentences and said, "I have a family law colleague. Her name is a Daisy. I'll send you her number tonight. Do not respond to anything from him without talking to her first." "Understood," Elena said. "Are you all right?" Elena looked in the rearview mirror at Mia and Marco, already drowsing in their car seats with the boneless trust of people who have no reason to doubt the person driving. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she said. She had met Daniel at 26 at a conference that neither of them had particularly wanted to attend. He had been funny and specific, and had brought her a coffee without asking how she took it, correctly, which she had found either impressively perceptive or slightly unnerving, and had chosen impressive. They had been married 18 months later in a garden in the Hunter Valley, with 60 people and her mother crying in the front row, and a speech from Daniel that had made Elena believe, with her whole chest, that she had found someone who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. She had been right, for a while. She was almost certain of that. She was almost certain it had been real. And then something had shifted, and she had spent 2 years trying to understand what, and then found out in the bluntest possible way that it was not a shift so much as a decision, made over time, made away from her. She had not hated him. That surprised her sometimes. She had expected hate, and gotten something colder and more final, a closing. A door swung shut, a room she had exited and locked. Adiesi called her the following morning. She was thorough and direct, and spoke in the specific register of someone who has seen worse and is therefore neither alarmed nor indifferent. She asked Elena about assets, about the property, about the timeline of the separation. Elena answered all of it, and then Adiesi said, "The children changed the calculation significantly. In your favor. I want you to understand that." "I understand," Elena said. "He has been absent for the entire pregnancy and the first 8 months of their lives. That is documented. The financial settlement is going to reflect that." Elena had not thought about money. Not really. Not as a weapon or a ledge to stand on. She had thought about her children, and about the apartment at her mother's, and about what the next year was going to look like. But she listened to Adiesi and filed what she said in the part of her mind where she was keeping the things that would matter later. Daniel called 7 times in the 3 days after the restaurant. She did not answer. He texted twice, long winding texts that she read once each and did not respond to. On the 4th day he sent a single message that said only, "I need you to know I didn't know." About the twins. "I need you to know that." She read it, and put her phone face down on the kitchen bench, and fed Marco his lunch, and thought about whether it changed anything. It didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the woman in the restaurant or the 8 months of carrying 2 people alone. It changed something smaller. It closed off one of the versions of the story where he was entirely irredeemable and filed him instead in the category of a man who had made choices without understanding their full weight. That category did not save the marriage. It made him a person she could eventually talk to about their children without her hands going cold. She moved out of her mother's apartment and into a place of her own in the 4th month after the restaurant. 2 bedrooms, 2nd floor. A courtyard with a fig tree that the previous tenant had planted and left behind. She put a rug down and a bookshelf up and a high chair on each side of the kitchen table, and stood in the middle of the living room on the first night, and felt the specific feeling of a space that was hers, and shaped by her, and answerable to no one but her. She had been an interior designer before the twins, freelance, steadily building, the kind of career that had been interrupted by pregnancy and was now going to be rebuilt around 2 people who napped in 2-hour windows and required, at minimum, 3 outfit changes per day. She had clients who had been patient. She had referrals she hadn't followed up on. She had a portfolio that sat on her laptop like a question she had been deferring. She stopped deferring. She called her 3 waiting clients in the same week she moved into the flat. She was direct about her situation. She had twins. She worked from home. She had a 3-month backlog, but her work was worth the wait. And if they wanted to discuss timelines, she was available Thursday afternoon when both children napped reliably. All 3 said yes. One of them, a developer named Ruth who communicated entirely in complete sentences and had been waiting 6 months, said, "Honestly, I was going to call you again next week. Take whatever time you need. The work speaks for itself." Alana hung up from that call and sat at her kitchen table in the quiet of nap time and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not happiness, exactly. Momentum. The feeling of a life moving in a direction she had chosen. The settlement took 7 months. It was not easy. There were conversations mediated by Adize that required Alina to sit very still and breathe the way she had learned to breathe in the restaurant parking garage. There were days when the figure on the table moved, and days when it didn't, and days when Daniel called Adize's office directly and was redirected firmly. Through it all, Alina kept working. She completed 2 projects during the settlement process. She took on a 3rd, the largest of her career, a full residential redesign for a property in Mosman, referred to her by Ruth, who had apparently been telling people about her. The Mosman project ran through spring. On the final walkthrough, the client, a woman named Helen, who had strong opinions and no tolerance for people who didn't also have strong opinions, stood in the finished living room and was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "This is exactly what I knew it could be. I just didn't know how to say it until now." Alina had walked home from that job with her portfolio under her arm and thought about that sentence for a long time. Exactly what I knew it could be. She thought about how much of her life had been that. The shape of a thing she had known was possible, but had not yet found the language for. She was finding it now. Room by room. The settlement was signed on a Thursday in October. Ayeze called her as she was walking out of the car park and said, "It's done," and Alina stood on the footpath in the October sun and felt something she could only describe as the sensation of weight being distributed correctly, not lifted, not gone, but properly placed at last. Daniel had Mia and Marco on alternate weekends by then. He had shown up for the first handover with the specific, careful energy of a man who knew he was on probation and intended to earn his way off it. He was good with them. Alina had watched him settle Marco on his hip on the front doorstep and had felt, not warmth, not forgiveness, but something that was going to be useful for the next 18 years. the recognition that the man who had failed her was not the same person as the father her children deserved to know. She would work with that. She already was. By the following spring, Alana's practice had expanded enough that she hired an assistant, a young woman named Cass, who was 23 and intensely organized and had, Alana noticed immediately, the quality of someone who documented things as a matter of instinct, who kept records not out of suspicion, but out of care. Elena paid her well and told her so, and Cass looked at her with an expression that said this was not what she had expected, and Elena thought, yes. That is the point. Serena had sent her a message 7 months after the restaurant. A short one. Elena had half expected it and half not. I want you to know I ended it the night of the restaurant. What you said to me, that we'd both been kept from the full picture, I've thought about it every week since. I'm sorry I was part of something that hurt you. You didn't deserve it. Elena read it twice. Then she replied, "Thank you for saying so. I hope you're well." She meant both sentences. She moved on. The twins turned 2 in June, in the courtyard under the fig tree, with 12 children and their parents, and Alina's mother, and Priya and Adayeze, who had been invited because some people you invite to birthday parties because they were there at the beginning of the thing you're now celebrating. There was cake. There was the specific chaos of 2-year-olds encountering icing for the second time in their lives and deciding the first time had not done it justice. There were photographs Elena would look at for the rest of her life. In one of them, Marco has both hands in the cake. Mia is watching him with an expression of pure scientific interest. Elena is laughing, not performing it, not managing it, just laughing, with her head thrown back and her eyes closed and everything she had built and carried and chosen visible in the way she is standing. She had carried 2 people alone for 8 months. She had walked into a restaurant and changed the direction of her life without raising her voice. She had signed papers and moved furniture and called clients and drawn rooms and built a practice in the spaces between nap times. She had shown up, consistently, for the 2 people who needed her most, and also, finally, for herself. She had not needed the restaurant to go the way it went. She had not needed Daniel to see her face and do the math and have the color leave his face in front of a room full of strangers. But she would not pretend it hadn't mattered, that the moment of being seen, clearly and completely, by the person who had chosen not to see her, had not done something to the story. It had closed it. It had put the last word on a sentence that had been running too long. Now she was writing new ones. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever carried something enormous alone and come out the other side of it with your hands still steady, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. What is the one thing you carried alone that made you stronger than you knew? The section is waiting for you.